So, welcome here. I'm going just to introduce you very quickly about something that happened in the past 40 years, actually, in the long run at least. But before going ahead, I would like just to know how many of you knows what is Web of Science or Scopus, just by raising your hand, just to understand. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about it, just to clarify. I'm going to talk about something different, which is, sorry, I'm just putting my timer here just to be extra sure. Yes, terrific. Something different, which is actually the kind of alternative choices that we have compared to Scopus and Web of Science. And but before starting, I need to clarify some aspects, because around the word citations and the word references, there are a lot of misunderstandings somehow, and also we may mean different things. And in order to clarify it, just to make an example, these are just two examples, two extracts from two different papers. And we used to call reference a lot of different things, that entity, the passage in the text that actually points to a descriptive element of the article defining some other work that has been cited. This is another reference. The reference is also the article that we are going to cite, and this kind of relation that we are creating, we used to call it citation. So this is the usual informal situation when we talk about these kind of things. And the very first thing I would like to just introduce here before going ahead is to provide appropriate terms in order to define what I mean when we talk about citation, at least in this talk and in the infrastructure organization that I'm going to present very soon in a few slides. So let's say that part within the text that refers to, in a way, to an article is actually an in-text reference pointer that denotes a bibliographic reference, okay, which is included in the article. And the fact that there is this bibliographic reference, the bibliographic reference is a sort of proxy that somehow references an existing article, so a specific artifact out there. Then, of course, these specific textual devices that we are creating are actually defining these links that say, okay, there is an entity that cites another one. And so, according to this relation, we have a citing entity and the cited entity. Okay, so this is made of these textual devices that are appearing, by the way, in the citing entity. So the links that is created, the citing links that is created, is not a real link that you can see, but is a conceptual directional link that is created by means of these textual devices included in the citing entity. So when I mention citations, I mean that specific link. And of course, for defining citation, and in particular for defining citation data that describe that link, we need specific things. The first one is a way to represent the link between the two, citing and cited entity. And the second thing that we really need is to have information, basic metadata for describing the citing entity, the cited entity. Basic metadata are technically title, author names, year of publication, venue of publication, all these kind of things that are actually and usually contained in the bibliographic references. And then we say that a bibliographic citation is an open citation when these data complies to a specific principle. That is, the data are structured, so represented in a structured format in order to be easy to process by machines. JSON, CSV, just to mention a few, but also more semantically aware format like RDF, just to make an example. They are separate. It means that I can access citation information even if I don't have access to the original articles that define it. Open. These data must be open in order to maximize their reuse in very different contexts and without any constraints. And then we need that the entities that are part of the citation, so the citing and the cited entity, are identifiable by means of a persistent identifier, whatever it is, and that we can use that persistent identifiers together with open protocols like HTTP to retrieve the basic metadata of the citing entity and cited entity. So these are the preconditions that must be there in order to talk about open citations. Of course, these kind of things were not there the very first time we started to talk about to collect actually these citations into databases. And that's why I'm starting from the kind of narrate the history of how we reach this idea of an open citation, starting from a very important article by Garfield that defines the very first time this idea of building up a citation index. So a database that contains this kind of information in a way. So bibliographic information plus citation links. He envisioned that specific database, the creation of that database in 1955, and that was the starting point of all the well-known citation indexes that we have used in the past, the proprietary one in particular, Scopus and Web of Science, that have been generated starting from these ideas. Of course, he worked to create these kind of indexes and then evolved in this kind of proprietary services. But then at a certain point, in 1990, the web was proposed by Tim Berners-Lee, and the web provided a lot of services and tools that then have been used in order to create this concept of open citation, in particular the HTTP protocol, just to mention a thing. And by means of this original idea by Garfield and these new technologies introduced by Tim Berners-Lee, Robert Cameron in 1997 envisioned the possibility of creating an open citation index by using web and internet technologies, because we had already the technology available, and so that should be the way to go in order to provide a service for the entire community that could look at without paying in principle any particular fee that are demanded by proprietaries and are still demanded by proprietary services right now. And CiteSeer was probably the first implementation of that idea that was created by providing automatic processing of PostScript papers available on the web, on the internet, that extracted citation and put it in a database accessible through the web. However, we needed to wait a bit more before going and implementing clearly this idea of open citations. And in particular, we have first of all Crossref that was created at the beginning of this century in order to promote and the development of cooperative use of new innovative technologies in the context of the scholarly publishing. But in particular, Crossref became one of the DOI agency that allowed to register a DOI, persistent identifier, to be used for uniquely identified scholarly articles on the web as well. After Crossref, which is an infrastructure, we do have the introduction of the semantic web that move on the evolution of the web by adding semantic information into the web, so more structured information to make it available on the web in a way that is also processable by machine. Google Scholar probably was one of the first free service. The data are not free. The service is surely free, that implemented somehow something that any user can use in terms of, let's say, searching for bibliographic metadata and citation data. And then there was another introduction by David Shatton that mash up all those things together by envisioning an evolution of the publishing system, the publishing domain, that in principle should enhance semantically existing journal article to provide additional metadata to make those journal articles more discoverable and also interoperable between them. So by starting from all these specific premises, a lot of infrastructures of open science infrastructure have been built in the following years. OpenAir is just an example at the European level. Open Citations, that I'm going to quickly introduce after these introductory slides, is another community guided infrastructure that exposes bibliographic and citations data. Wikidata, that a lot of you should know, have started to collect information, bibliographic database, for serving in particular Wikimedia project, including Wikipedia, but not only those kind of projects. And in 2015 started a kind of initiative dedicated to bibliographic metadata and citations data that is called Wikicite. And Microsoft Academic Graph, when Microsoft at a certain point entered in the game, providing a free database and free APIs for accessing and for building additional tools upon those kind of things. What happened after that is that this topic was well pushed, let's say, by the community itself. The community started to organize a lot of conferences to advertise it, and there were also a bunch of initiatives that wanted, from a policy perspective, if you want to push publisher that owns those data in principle, to release them as freely available and open material, something that worked very well actually in the past few years. Then what it happens is that maybe the most used source for this kind of open citations data, that was Microsoft Academic Graph, was shut down by Microsoft at the end of 2021 because it was any more compliant with their vision as a company. Basically speaking, they have provided a lot of things, but now they stopped basically to support that. And then luckily another non-for-profit company our research was entitled to get the data from a Microsoft Academic Graph and to re-offer them as open data, that is OpenAlex, in the OpenAlex database. And all these premises was the basic starting point for big policy initiatives at the European and also global level. Among the various one, I would like to mention COARA, which is a way to reform research assessment. These data coming also from proprietary sources are crucial for doing research assessment all over the world in the scholarly domain. But the point is that COARA wanted to push this research assessment initiative a bit further by pushing for, in addition to use more peer-reviewed judgments, but to have these judgments informed by even quantitative metrics that are transparent and so available in particular, something that proprietary service cannot provide. And the Barcelona Declaration is a recent one, which provided important additional policy about the importance for institutions running let's say policy exercises, assessment exercise, like university, like founders, like governments and so on, to provide and use for their own processes open research information, which are basically metadata about research. So metadata about articles, about citations, about funders, about projects and whatsoever, everything that can describe research. So this is what it happens very briefly. I mean, it happened a lot of additional things. These are just, milestones, highlights of what happened in the past 30 years. And within this context, we are trying basically to, let's say, to offer something to the community. So OpenCitations, Arcangelo has already introduced that in the previous section. OpenCitations is a community guided open science infrastructure. The goal that we have here is just to harvest and publish bibliographic metadata and citations data about the scholarly domain in general. The 4 different things that OpenCitations basically provide are a data model that we use for describing the data, of course, 2 different citations database that we call OpenCitations Meta and OpenCitation Index that contains information about bibliographic entities and citations. All the data that we have are published in CC0 to maximize their reuse. Since we are we are following the principle on open scholarly infrastructure, we care a lot about using only open source to make available the infrastructure itself. And so all the tool that we use and we develop for the infrastructure is actually published with open source licenses to maximize the reuse also of the software and to make it possible to move the infrastructure in another let's say, in another provider, in another institution, if we need to do that, even if right now is handled administratively by the University of Bologna. And a lot of online services, including dumps and systems for accessing the data, in particular REST APIs. And the ethical rule that OpenCitation has is that all these kind of things will be free for all without any limitation. So the idea is that you don't have to pay a fee for using the API. You don't have to pay a fee for downloading the data. You can use them. That's all. We are getting information from 5 different sources right now that are kind of known in the area: Crossref Datasite, National Institute of Health, Open Citation Collection, OpenAir, and the Japan Link Center. And we are including in our system more than 2.2 billion citations that among different entities included in these 2 different databases. You can use the APIs to download to get the data. You can just download entirely the data itself. And we are also developing tools because our goal is also to improve the quality of the data. We do not have curators. We are just a bunch of people working with that. So there are tools that we are developing too. And Arcangelo is the main developer of Heritrace, is an editor. Yeah, is an editor with for improving the quality of the data that we have, and we are already collaborating with PKP and TIB for building up plugins for crowdsourcing data from PDFs that are not represented in proprietary services in particular. In addition to being involved with the community in several other initiatives, including COMET, Barcelona Declaration, Quorum, and so on. So that was basically all. The last thing is that we have a bunch of people working here. We are totally public and free for all, but of course we need money to pay the salaries for these guys to keep the infrastructure running. So if your institutions would be happy to support an open science initiative, there in that link in the slide, there are instructions on how to support us financially, or if you want to support us by doing things, just send us an email, okay? And that was basically, oh, thank you so much.